I would always hear people saying like, oh, don't go to Central on a Sunday. They might think you're a helper, And that came to show me that there is a real problem there. Because if we Filipinos can't even accept and support each other, how do we expect that other people are also going to empower the women migrant workers here in Hong Kong?
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. I'm Isabel Wong, a financial journalist who wants to uncover the many Asian stories around us that are waiting to be told. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Crisel Consunji, an award-winning actress and entrepreneur who was born and raised in Manila. Currently based in Hong Kong, Crisel is the first Filipino to be nominated and to receive an acting award in the Hong Kong Film Awards. She tells us about the work she does that has touched the hearts of Filipinos and her mission as an early childhood educator. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. For this week, I'm so glad to be welcoming award-winning actress and entrepreneur, Crisel. Thank you so much for joining us on Proudly Asian, Crisel.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad to finally make this conversation happen because I know you have really busy schedules. And just out of curiosity, what's been keeping you busy? I know that last Christmas you had this performance at Disneyland and all your performances and videos look so good.
Oh, thank you, Isabel. Well, first of all, I gave birth last May. So it's almost been a year. And for anyone who's ever taken care of a baby, it's been a lot of sleepless nights and sleep deprivation. But in the course of that amazing year, I've also had the great opportunity to work with a lot of singers to get back into more performing work. And I actually did 2 concerts last year and a couple of other performances. So that's been going well. And yes, thank you. I had a wonderful time singing for Disney. I don't know if some of you know that I actually started, my first job in Hong Kong was to work for Hong Kong Disneyland. So that's what got me here in 2008. I did it for about 3 years. Coming back 12 years later, 12 years since I left, right? And 15 years since I came to Hong Kong, right? It was a full circle moment, singing in front of the castle. And my solo song was actually Journey to the Past from Anastasia. So that was very heartfelt for me, I think.
I saw one of the videos that your baby girl was able to see you perform as well. So that is just such a heartwarming moment. But before we get into the rest of the conversation, we usually ask every single guest on Proudly Asian this question. So, Crisel, why don't you tell us about your background? Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
Okay. I'm Filipino and I grew up in Manila, and I lived there for basically all my life until I was 23. I started performing when I was 10 years old, so professionally. I was in a company called Repertory Philippines, and that's where I learned my craft. And I did that for 13 years. And during this time, it was an interesting journey. I didn't think I'd stay in the performing arts for a long time. But I did stay for 13 years. And during this time, I thought I would take a different path. I studied my bachelor's and my master's in political science because I wanted to be involved in development work. And that was an interesting, there was interesting turn of events when I just said like, okay, I'm done with the theater. I'm going to go into my quote unquote, at that time, real job. There was this pressure. Of course, that's not something valid. It's not something you want to say nowadays to people because being an artist is a real job. But back then it was a different scene. So and then by the time I said I would go into another field, Disney called, and so I got on a plane and I came here to Hong Kong, and then I worked for 3 years in Disney. After that, I said, oh, I want to try other things. I retrained as an early years educator. I took my I took my training and then my master's in education here, focusing on early childhood development, and then fusing that with my love for music and performance and a desire to bring the arts into education. I retrained, and now I run my own center for children. It's called Baumhaus. It's a family center, the first of its kind in Hong Kong. And it's been running for 8 years, and we distribute the kinder music program for children 0 to 3 years old. So it's a bit of a full circle journey, because then I get to pass on the love for music and this really good foundation for learning for the next generation. Along the way, and that's why probably a lot of you know me, or no, maybe not everybody, but most people who know me because of the film that I did. That was supposed to be a side project that turned out to be very interesting, because I did the film Still Human because I believed in the story, and it was about empowering also a lot of Filipino migrant workers here in Hong Kong, and yes, that got me back into performing. So here I am now. It's my complicated answer to what am I. I'm a singer, I'm an actress, I'm an early childhood educator, and I'm an entrepreneur, and most recently a mother.
Oh, wow.
Was that the question? Or was it about identity? Yes, okay.
I mean, there's no motto answer to the question, but yeah, it's such a beautiful journey, and I can't wait to see what else the future has in store for you, any other amazing projects that you'll be involved in. But just out of curiosity, during your years growing up, I'm just wondering if there were any defining moments during your formative years that sort of shape your beliefs and the kind of decisions that you made subsequently in life.
I think my exposure to the theater was very pivotal for me, because I got really exposed to different ways of thinking. I learned from an early age that you really need to work hard, and talent or ambition is not enough. It's really putting in the work and the discipline day in and day out. Being in the theater also opened my mind to being more empathetic towards other people, try to understand different cultures, and putting myself in the shoes of other people and other characters.
You lightly mentioned that you really spend a lot of time in learning, performing, but I'm just wondering, what really got you started as a kid with performing?
I just really love to sing. I never took these summer workshops or classes, because during the summer, my parents would just say, "Oh, go out and play." So we'd fly to visit my relatives abroad. So it was really, so I don't think so. I think they didn't expect that this child who just liked to sing and dance around actually wanted to do it seriously. According to my mom, when I was 10. I went over and I said, "Hey, there's an open call." I showed her a newspaper clipping, and it was for Repertory Philippines production of Evita, and they needed a chorus of children, and I said, "I want to do that." And my mom said, "Really? You've never really done this. You haven't, maybe you sang in school or whatnot, but you haven't really done anything professional. You did train for this." And I was like, "Well, it's worth a try. I'd like to try," basically. Apparently, I was really adamant that I wanted to do it. And I got in. And then I was very lucky, because at that time, one of the directors, Joy Verata, was pioneering theater for young audiences, and so she actually needed young people all the time to play the children's roles, and so I fit right in, and I just I just grew with it from year after year. So yeah, that's what started it.
I mean, obviously, you mentioned earlier you thought you would move into this real job by studying political science in uni, right? But in 2008, you moved to Hong Kong to work as a lead vocalist at Hong Kong Disneyland. I'm just wondering if there were any other motivating factors that prompted your move to Hong Kong other than this job opportunity.
I just wanted to try something different, I think. And at the time I was finishing my dissertation for my master's thesis, and I was so stressed. And I think I was in a crisis of you know, do I really want to write academic papers? And I said, okay, let me take this offer. It's for 8 months in Disney. And I thought, I mistakenly thought that, oh, this was going to be an easy gig. How hard can it be? It's going to be fun. I have a lot of time to study and write my thesis. But it was a very rude awakening because, it's a very rigorous job. Being in Disney, yes, it's the happiest place on earth. But to keep that magic and to keep that happiness, there are thousands of people in the background, making those wheels work. And I think I learned a lot in terms of being professional. I mean, I already learned a lot from doing that for 13 years in the Philippines. The rigors, the hard work. But here it was a different scenario because we would do the same shows for maybe 5 shows a day maximum, 5 days a week, and basically the whole year. And to be able to keep your stamina, keep your integrity as a performer, and keep the quality, it takes a lot out of you, not just physically, emotionally, mentally. I know it doesn't seem like it, but you can try doing the same thing. By the 5th time you're doing it during the day, I tell you that your brain is already playing games with you.
It's such a tough job being a performer because to the audiences, it might be the first time they ever see the show, but then to the performers, it might be they have performed that same act for 1,000 times. And it's not even like every day they would feel their best selves, right? Sometimes they could be sick. Sometimes they might not be feeling, like happy or like excited, but they still got to carry on with the show. So I have so much respect for, all the performers and also performers who work at Disneyland. But I mean, going back to your move to Hong Kong, right? I'm just wondering, what was your first impression of the city? And was it quite like what you imagined the city would be?
I really like Hong Kong. Within the first month of being here, I realized that I wanted to live here for a long time. I think it's one of those places where you have a lot of opportunity. You have opportunities to reimagine, re-envision a life for yourself. There are many options that are open. And I know there are challenges attached to them, but Hong Kong is a place where your hard work, your talent, and your determination, and your relationships with people actually help you create an ecosystem and a network, and wherein you can create a life for yourself. At least that was my perspective when I came in. It's a small city that's big in many ways. At the same time, I also felt Hong Kong. You hear my baby in the background. At the same time, I also felt that Hong Kong is an exciting place because you could be sitting in a cafe and chatting with somebody who turns out to be from an entirely different field, an entirely different industry, or an entirely different country, way of life, and sometimes you make friends in the strangest of places, and I found that some of these friendships have lasted the 15 years that I've been here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, living in Hong Kong, I do realize how easy it is to meet people. And I mean, how you're so close to all the places. Like, if you want to meet up with a new person or meet up with friends, it could be like 15 minutes or 10 minutes away. And then you're in a new place, meeting new people. So it's amazing that way. But of course, Hong Kong is this international city. Its diverse population is one of its strengths. But of course, every city has its own social issues. And one of the social issues is that ethnic minorities aren't always treated or viewed favorably in Hong Kong. So I'm just wondering, for yourself, living here for 15 years, have you ever had any personal experience and moments where you felt like you might not be treated as fairly as you could be?
I did have a challenging experience when I was transitioning out of Disney and trying to get myself established as an educator. There were so many barriers for me, but one of these barriers was something that was not just a bias that wasn't working towards Filipinos, but it was also working against the interests of locals, so Asians in general. There was this belief, 12 years ago, mind you, that it was that parents, and I put this in quotations, parents preferred native English teachers to locals or Filipinos. It was like the standard of education would not be equal if you were taking an Asian or specifically a local or a Filipino teacher. And I remember it was a struggle for me because I had to prove that I could speak fluently and that I could teach in English. I had to bring out these certifications, and it was a challenge to hear this in a professional setting. It was something I didn't expect I would hear from quote unquote professionals saying, "Oh, but you know that parents prefer native English teachers." And in one setting, I was even shocked because somebody must have not been thinking straight, because this person said, "You know, they prefer somebody who's white." And I was so shocked. It really is, it does a disservice, not just to Filipino teachers, but to local teachers as well. That's just not fair. And thankfully, our society has collectively evolved. And now there is so much more opportunity. But back then it was a challenge. I even had a principal mention, "Oh, well, you know what we can do? We can hire you as a TA, but since we can't get your visa, maybe you could sing at a bar, get your visa there, through that, and then be a TA here." And I was like, is this what locals and what Asians, what Filipinos would have to deal with? I said, nah. So I had to establish myself in a different way. Obviously, once I got a job teaching, I had to learn what was the industry, what were the strengths, what were the weaknesses, and eventually it gave me an opportunity to understand what the needs were, and the needs were not just for quality instruction, but also opportunities for locals, for Asians, for ethnic minorities, to have a stepping stone, and that's something later on I'll share with you that I was able to do through Bound House.
But the other aspect to ethnic minorities, I mean, of course, a lot of people would know that there's a huge presence of foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong, and they mainly come from the Philippines, Indonesia, Southeast Asia countries, right? So I'm just wondering, when you arrived in Hong Kong, how did it make you feel knowing about the general perception of foreign domestic helpers here?
Oh, that's a very big question. You see, that's so complex as to what I was feeling towards the situation. Obviously, it's always disturbing. It's disturbing having come from a background where I had to study this in uni, and I had to do my internship in the country's socioeconomic think tank. I know the figures, and to see it, it's an entirely different story. To hear each story of these women about the challenges they face, and not just here, but more so what happens in their families back home. That was always concerning. I think the big thing for me coming here was seeing that there wasn't really a lot of things for them to do or anywhere for them to go. And until now, that's still a problem. I mean, that's still an issue, that, Hong Kong is a place where there are a lot of resources. Why aren't there spaces and centers? Why are we still a agreeing to this whole culture of being on the streets. I mean, it's a different story if that's what you really want. But the fact that you don't have much choices beyond that, that's an issue. I feel like that's an ongoing issue that people are trying to rectify in their own small ways and in different projects. I also felt that if there is any social discrimination, it wasn't just from people in Hong Kong or people from the international community, but rather from Filipinos as well, right? That was very disheartening for me because I would always hear people saying like, oh, don't go to Central on a Sunday. They might think you're a helper, And that came to show me that there is a real problem there because if we Filipinos can't even accept and support each other, then I think how do we expect that other people are also going to empower the women migrant workers here in Hong Kong?
And you also brought up a bit of how we can perceive this, right? Like it might not just be at the racism level, there's a bit of that socioeconomic level as well. So when you first mentioned that to me, I thought it was quite eye-opening.
Yeah, I think it's not, like I mentioned earlier when you asked me, the issue for me is not, it's a social discrimination issue, right? I think people are quick to label things, racial discrimination. I think it's not... sometimes it's that, many times it's that, but there's also that socioeconomic aspect. There's a social discrimination that just because you do this, ergo, that means you are all the other words that I hesitate to say it, but the judgments of, oh, because you're working as a helper, you are ill-educated or poor and a host of all other things like not well-mannered, etc., etc. But that's not actually true. There are about, from the Filipinos, I think there should be about 250,000 migrant workers. And you can't expect the same story for everyone, right? Everybody comes here with a different purpose, different background, and different circumstance. And in the community work that I've been doing since arriving in Hong Kong 15 years ago, it's the same. It's always the same. There's so many different stories, and most of these stories are those that you and I can relate with. Somebody coming here, let's say somebody was a teacher in the Philippines, but at some point her dad had to have like some heart surgery, and so she said, okay, let me go to Hong Kong and just make that money to send back home. Or some people who say like they started here, they would have just stayed for a few years, and then they realized that there was not really a home for them to come back to, so they just stayed on for another 15 years, And these stories are always happening around us, but they're stories that all of us can relate to. It's not something that's very just specific to migrant domestic workers.
There's definitely a lot of layers and different ways to look at it. And I really love how you pointed out discrimination, whether social or racial, is never just, let's say, West against Asians. Like there's also discrimination among Asians as well. And sometimes it might be worse, which brings me to talk about the movie debut that you did. You mentioned a little bit about you first debuted as an actress here in Hong Kong with the movie called Still Human, which is of course a movie that a lot of Hong Kongers know you by, and you also won an award as the best new performer at the Hong Kong Film Awards as well. So it's huge achievements as a first-time actress on the big screens. And for listeners who aren't too familiar with the plot, I'll just give you a quick introduction about the movie. So the movie basically tells of the story between a paralyzed Hong Kong man and his new Filipino domestic helper, who is a former nurse who has put her dream on hold of being a photographer to move to Hong Kong to earn a living. And the movie basically explores how invisible people with disabilities and foreign domestic workers are, and how they sort of find this intersectionality and similarities in terms of their experiences despite they are from different places. So it's a very heartwarming story. I remember watching it on a flight and I sort of cried towards the end as well. But I just want to quickly ask you, Crisel, like how did this opportunity came about and how did you feel when you first received the script?
There was an open casting call in 2017 and it was just on Facebook. And I was more curious because it said like, oh, a Hong Kong production is gonna make a movie which has, which puts the story of the Filipino migrant worker on, on the spotlight. And I appreciated that it was it was a script that was really, really fair, I think, in many different areas. I was so pleasantly surprised that when I went to the casting call, that director Oliver Chan Siu-kun actually did a lot of research and she understood the concept. All of these things I'm telling you about the intricacies of the social dynamics, not just with the Filipinos and the rest of the world, but rather even among Filipinos. And I said, she gets it. And there was a lot of respect with the way she was treating the story. And I said, wow, I'm surprised that somebody was able to get the essence of this, and that she's actually willing to gamble on putting the stories of these two characters on equal footing. And I'm like, this is great. And I remember thinking that if I wouldn't be cast in the role, I would love to be part of the production. See, by this time I had been doing a lot of community work, and so I've been collecting all these stories of migrant workers. In fact, I was saying, oh, one day I'd love to be able to share them. So I've said this before, when this opportunity came up, I felt like it was a chance to make the character like an amalgamation of all these different stories and different women that I've met. And it was a chance to give a very respectful and very balanced narrative where people could make their own analysis and give their own fair feelings towards the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got to add some context as well, because when you mentioned when you first received the script, you were so pleasantly surprised by how fair the plot was. Like, it is really something that's not common in Hong Kong, because for those who know the media representation of foreign domestic workers on TV or on screens, a lot of the time it's very stereotypical. They aren't as smart, or like they would have heavy accents. So for Hong Kongers to be able to see foreign domestic workers to be presented this way, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the first time, but it's very, very rare. So I'm just wondering, what was the process like as a first-time movie actress at the time? How did you prepare for the role?
To be honest, I don't remember much because I just remembered that we had to cram so much filming because it was a low-budget film, right? I had no idea that it would make it big. I just thought that this was a nice passion project and it had a nice message, and maybe we would go to universities and talk about and begin dialogue on diversity and had intercultural communication and intercultural sensitivity. Then boom, it's like, oh, it went to the big screen, and oh, we're now in the award ceremony, and yeah. So for me, it was always a social project. So I didn't have that kind of, oh my gosh, I'm an actor, I have to prepare for this role. No, for me it was like, okay, we're on set now. And to be honest, I was already running my own business at that time, right? I'd be like, okay, I have today, okay, let me get into it. Okay, what does the director want? Now, it was a challenge for me because my medium until then had been primarily just the stage. So everything has to be big, big, big. But I took the directions from Siu-kun, and she's a brilliant director, so she got what she needed. And yeah, and the whole team was professional. They were so easy to work with, and their hearts were in the right place. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it was a low budget project, so the people who were doing it because they believed in the story, and it was such a nice environment to work in, and yeah. We just listened to each other and, followed found the integrity of the story. and we just let it come alive.
Wow. And the efforts paid off definitely, because Still Human exceeded all the expectations and won international recognition. And after you did the movie, did you ever get a chance to hear what foreign domestic workers in Hong Kong think of the movie and the portrayal of Evelyn?
Yes. So I had several of our migrant women workers come up and say, and in Filipino, of course, they would say, "Oh, Crisel, you made me cry." And I'm like, wow, that's like the biggest compliment, because especially people who know me, right? And like, for example, in Baumhaus, we have a lot of our nannies, our caregivers. A lot of them are Filipino migrant workers. And they said, "Teacher Crisel," they were like, "Oh, I could so relate. You know that part when you said this? Oh, we said that's so true." And I'm like, oh, if you can, for a few seconds, forget that you know me and think that I'm telling your story, then okay, then I must have done something good, you know? So yeah, I think that was the biggest compliment, honestly. And I've said this before, even if I won the award, if I walked out and then these women would say, "Oh my gosh, that was not really a depiction of me," then that would be a shame, right? And even if I didn't win the award, but I went out and these women said, "Oh my gosh, thank you for telling our story, and thank you for doing it with dignity," then my job was done. I think the best things in life happen when you're not going after the recognition, but you're going after the truth of the story you're telling.
That's beautiful. And it goes to say how important representation is, because a lot of people recently watched the Oscars to see Malaysian actress Michelle Yeoh being the first Asian getting the Best Actress award. And for the first time ever, Asian girls who look like Michelle, they could relate to the Best Actress at the Oscars. It's a huge, huge moment. So I can definitely feel that emotions, when the viewers and the people who are Filipinos coming up to you, telling you about how touched they are about your performance. And I really do hope the Hong Kong movie industry and also the whole production field will give more chances to Filipino actors, actresses, and also ethnic minority actors, actresses to play the roles that actually represent their people and themselves. Because previously on Proudly Asian, we had some like actors and actresses who would point out the problem that some of these ethnic minority roles would be given to maybe ethnically Chinese actors and actresses, and they wish they had the chance to be cast and represent their own people. So,
but yeah, I want to say something about that. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong when others play your ethnicity. I think as an actor, you should be able to traverse different ethnicities. I think it might be a bit hypocritical for me to say, "Oh, only Filipinos can play Filipino roles," because by the same token, a bunch of Filipinos have played Vietnamese in Miss Saigon. So you can't have a double standard. I think the question is more of access, right, and opportunity. Can these ethnic minorities play their ethnic minority characters as well as other characters, right, in Hong Kong society? Can ethnic minorities play your neighbor, your banker, your lawyer, your waitress, your so many different things, but not a whole gamut of roles, not just the same stereotypical ones.
Yeah, I agree. That's also the job of actors. They have to show the versatility. They have to show the range of characters that they are able to play. So yeah, that's a very good point. And now moving on, I also want to talk about, you wear a lot of hats. You're an actress. You're also a new mom. As mentioned earlier, you're also an early childhood educator. And for years now, you've been putting in a lot of hard work, focusing on growing your own business, the Creative Arts Learning Center for Children that you have developed. So I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what you do there and what do you hope to achieve through this project?
I think there are two elements to what we do. So we've pioneered the family center concept in Hong Kong. And what people see is a classroom, a playroom, and a cafe. But what we really try to do is create a community for families where you can practice being the best, feeling your best as a parent, and knowing that you have a village that supports you. So that's the one side. But the other side of it is about the cultivation of talent. So yes, the main product, if you want to call it such, is our music-based program, which supports learning from the earliest years, from a few weeks old. Your babies, even from your tummy, your babies are learning through music, the beats, everything is connected through inflections, beats, tones, sound. It's one of those things. I could go on and on, but the point is, it's about creating a foundation for creativity and artistry, and we use music as that language. But I would say that we do it for the children, but we also especially do it for the parents to understand what it means to grow up creatively. How do you support and nurture that? How do you create that environment where your child will thrive? Having had the arts build up my character, my perspective, and basically my path for the future, it's something I want to help children have access to, and it's something I want to have parents understand, right? That there are certain ways to encourage creativity and not just drill and get certificates to be the best, to be the top grade pianist or singer or instrument player. And at the same time, I want it to be a creative ecosystem whereby we're not just empowering the children, the parents, and the caregivers as well, but we're also empowering our staff to pursue their dreams, to pursue their ambitions. And we've especially made it possible for young local talent, young local pre-service teachers to come and train in our music-based program. We've opened our doors and have promoted local and ethnic minority teachers, and given them access, given them a platform, given them the tools, and also then seeing how we can move this and share it with our community. So we've also done outreach. We've also done classes for underprivileged or less privileged areas. And our goal is that this kind of knowledge and this kind of practice should be shared. So my dream actually is that if in the future what we do becomes so common that nobody would even have to pay for it, and organizations like ours wouldn't have to exist for profit just to fund what we love to do.
Wow. I really love how you have built this platform that allows the freedom and space for talent development, not just children, like you mentioned, right? Like multiple groups of people can benefit from this platform that you've built. And also you've used this platform to curate the food that you serve at your center as well. Because I remember seeing lately that you're featuring this local bakery that's offering ube desserts where they do like pandesal, ube mochi, brownie. So that's wonderful.
It's so yummy. I think that's the thing, right? In a community-based enterprise, you can actually support and promote different endeavors and initiatives. You can incubate not just ideas, but you can also grow these different businesses, products, and there's this whole convergence and collaborations between all these small businesses that come together because you have a similar set of values and philosophies.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a very amazing way to think of learning center. I mean, of course, most of it is for children, but then there are so many added benefits when you build such platform. And my other question for you is, you are incredibly busy. Now you're also a mom. Has motherhood changed the way that you work and approach life? How do you make all these happen?
Well, motherhood has definitely affected my work and my life because it's very hard to function when you're sleep deprived, chronically sleep deprived. So there is a very tangible effect. But I think, kidding aside, no, actually not kidding, it's true. That aside, I think motherhood has compelled me to really look at my priorities, because now that time and energy is so limited, I really need to strategize and figure out what can I do and where can I be to make an impact that's actually going to bear fruit. So I've had to be very strategic about my time and my energies, and basically mature in those ways. Someone actually told me recently that the older you get, or the more mature you get, the more you progress in life, the more you have to look inside you and find that strength to be a strength for others. Because the more you grow, the less people you have above you to ask for help from. Instead, you realize that more people rely on you to help them understand what they're going through and what they need to do. So I think that has been a very conscious effort on my part to manage myself and respect where I'm at, and honor the growth, make peace with the things that no longer serve me. What do I need to grow into, and what do I need to leave behind? So those are very existential questions that have really tangible effects. But I think it happens when you have a big responsibility and a big shift as motherhood. And for some people, similar shifts happen in many different ways, because motherhood, I think, is a concept that's not always just related to a biological birth, but rather a change in your life whereby you're giving birth to an idea, to a concept, or a person, and you have a responsibility to be the life force on which this entity or this person or this idea draws from.
Oh, wow. That's so beautiful. And for our listeners, if you happen to hear Crisel's baby girl during this episode, it's the beauty of womanhood, because now, and also thanks to technology, Crisel could be doing this podcast next to the baby girl. So, I mean, kudos to all the mothers, momtrepreneurs out there. But before we move on to the next segment, I just have one more question to get your perspective on as an educator, because we have heard, maybe not specifically Hong Kong, but then I've heard some examples of people hearing about like parents introducing the idea of foreign domestic helpers and Southeast Asians being lowly or dirty to their children. So this obviously contributes to the discrimination against certain members of the society. But in your view as an educator, can social inequality be addressed in early education, since children generally don't see differences early on as a negative aspect, but the social divide is so deeply rooted in a lot of Asian communities as well? So I'm wondering, from the education points of view, what can we do?
I think I'll answer that from a sociological perspective, not just an education perspective. We're looking at this whole phenomenon where society has evolved because of the circumstances from decades ago already. So you've had probably the first wave of migrant domestic workers, probably in the late 80s, 90s. So a lot of the families now, a lot of the people in this generation who are parents, who are raising their children, were raised by a lot of migrant women. When they were growing up, they were looking at these women as their second mothers, right? Or a nurturing figure in their lives. And today's parents are very conscientious about how they raise their children. They want these kinds of values for their children. So I think it already is changing, slowly but surely. But to your point, education does have an impact, because when you're dealing with children, obviously for them, like you said, it's not about, there's no malice, right? If a child comes up to me and says, "Oh, hi teacher, oh, you're from the Philippines. My auntie is also from the Philippines." There's no malice there. For them, actually, it might even be a compliment, right? That, "Oh, that's awesome. You might be friends with the person I love." You know what I mean? So I think, there is that impact, right? But I think society has been changing. You do see pockets of stories where it's not, it doesn't show the best of society, but you also have, on the other hand, a big number of people who are growing in that direction. So, and in the other part, the better part, and we should celebrate that.
Yeah, totally agree. But now it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is called Rapid Bias. In this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some point in life. So, Crisel, are you ready?
Sure.
All right, let's go. And first question. Don't go out on Sunday so people won't think you are a foreign domestic helper.
There's no answer to that, honestly, because it's like, I don't feel like I have to change anything. I don't think I have to change anybody's perception. If you think I'm a helper, then that's what you think, right? It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't affect me. Because for me, it neither has a positive nor negative connotation. It's just like, oh, you look like a teacher. Oh, you look like a banker. Oh, you look like a helper. I'd probably be like, oh, really? What makes you say that? And that's my first impulse. Yeah, but if it has malice, then I always think that it's always a reflection on people. If people's perspective of other cultures are very limited, that actually says that they're not as sophisticated. So I feel worse for them. But at the same time, if somebody thought I'm a helper, it doesn't matter because it's just another type of employment. It's just another identity. It's neither good nor bad.
And the next question is, aren't all Filipinos in Hong Kong domestic helpers?
That tells a lot about the circles that people come from, and it's just possible that they're not in a wider circle, I guess, not in a community where you get to meet a lot of people from different walks of life, and that's a bit sad for them, not for me, right?
Next question. How do you speak English so well?
Well, majority of the Filipinos I know speak English, and many of us go through an education system that has English as a medium of instruction. So, yeah. Oh, and check your history. We were colonized by the U.S. for quite some time, so our culture is heavily influenced by that.
And finally, Filipinos are uneducated.
That's a very uneducated statement. I don't want to be mean, but I feel sorry for the person saying that. But I probably wouldn't actually encounter someone like that because most of the people I know are educated. And education is not something based on somebody's status in life, but the way people have been raised to treat everyone around them, regardless of where they come from.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much for going through this round of Rapid Bias, Crisel. Now, for us to conclude the episode, I'm wondering if you have any advice that you want to share with our listeners.
I think just be true to yourself. Just be honest with yourself. We have different phases in our lives and we are continually changing. And we cannot expect to be the same person we were 5 years, 10 years ago, or even last week. And I think we need to sit with our feelings and understand who we are and be unapologetic about the things that we're so sure about in ourselves. That kind of confidence allows us to actually become, share a story, give a real message. And that's what makes an impact to others and in society.
And finally, Crisel, what does it mean to be proudly Filipino to you?
Proudly Filipino, oh my gosh. The first thing that came into my head was eating Filipino food. But it's definitely not the answer you want. But proudly Filipino. I think it's embracing our culture for all its and our people, for both the good and bad. I think there is this misconception sometimes that, if you're proudly Filipino, then you can't accept any criticism. No, there's a lot to improve on in our culture for sure. But I think celebrating the good and maybe sometimes laughing at the not so good and see how we can make things better. But mainly I think it's being proud of who we are and not having to make any apologies for what we do in our culture. So yes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on Proudly Asian, Crisel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's so fun. It was so much fun.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.